हमारे मैडम जोड़ा हुआ अटेम्प्ट के ऊपर पासवर्ड चाप नहीं दे देखा है फेसबुक पर चालू से वीडियो और फेसबुक तो लाइव नहीं हुआ हां प्रॉब्लम છે કે શું છે कौन बोला? कौन का?
जी सुधांशी।
कनेक्टिंग टू ऑडियो आएगा करे છે તમારું આવી
હા આવી ગયું સાહેબ. આવી ગયું
અવાજ
થઈ ગયો ને ટાઈમ આપણે. જયદીપ સાહેબ આપણે સેશન ચાલુ કરી દઈએ, વાંધો નહીં.
हाँ नमस्ते सर.
નમસ્તે.
So good afternoon to all.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the second day of the Young Researcher Meet for Resurgence and Innovation, which is jointly organized by SSIT Veer Narmad Southern University and Research for Resurgence Foundation. And the theme of the session is Research Avenue and New Areas. And to guide us on this theme, today we have with us Professor Sirish Kulkarni sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sardar Patel University, Vallabh Sir, I heartily welcome you. And
Thank you.
On behalf of the University, I also express my deep sense of gratitude for having accepted the invitation and accepted to guide our research scholar. So I once again heartily welcome you, sir. We also have with us our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Hemaliben Desai. So I also welcome Dr. Hemaliben Desai for encouraging and motivating the students. Before we start, in fact, Kulkarni sir need no introduction, but to give you a brief idea about the research scholar, sir holds MCom, B.Ed, LLB, MPhil and PhD degrees and is having more than 30 years of teaching and research experience. And sir's area of interest are accounting, finance and taxation. So without wasting much of the time, sir, I handed over the session to you, sir.
Thank you. The only question coming to my mind is there are only 3 participants in this Young Researchers Meet.
Sir, there are more than 100 participants, but it cannot be accommodated on Zoom, so we are telecasting the live streaming on the YouTube.
Oh, I see.
YouTube
Otherwise,
and Facebook.
Zoom, it is showing only 3.
Yeah, Zoom only panelists will be there, sir. Others are joined by the YouTube and Facebook, sir.
Maybe. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
So, good afternoon to all of you. The subject for today's talk is related to the young researchers, the avenues, and the new areas. That's what has been stated to me. I first congratulate those who are participants. I again recognize the presence of the Vice Chancellor of Veer Narmad South Gujarat University, that she is also attending any one of the session. That's fine and fantastic. She has taken the keen interest. She called me also for this particular webinar. So I thank you, madam. And ultimately, this has taken place, and for 3 days it is going on. Till tomorrow it will continue, and so many ideas will be coming to the researchers by this type of webinar. Anyway, coming to the subject, that is, you consider as an commerce, management, economics, accounting, finance, taxation. In economics also, there are so many areas in which one can approach and go for the research. Like there is a econometrics also, which is a very interesting area for the researcher. And normally econometrics is used in the research of economics. Any economics research, normally they are using this econometrics because it is related to numerical things. Then you have got the other sectors like agriculture is also coming under the economics, industry also is coming under the economics. Or you can say industry also comes under, service sector also comes under this economics. These three, service, agriculture, and the industry, contributes to GDP. So these all three sectors also areas for the research in economics. Others are also there in management also. One can reach to the human resource management. In economics, you can go for human development also. In management, you can have a marketing management. You can have the administration. You can have personnel management. So many areas are there in which one can go for research. In accounting, finance, and taxation, again, there are huge areas in which one can go for the proposals. Like financial performance is always in the focus of many researchers. Financial performance of several areas, like it can be bank also, it can be any industry also, it can be even agriculture, it can be ONGC, so many things are there. And that financial performance is always focused by the normal researchers. So financial performance, again, you can have another topic in finance. See, there is a cost accounting. One is a financial management, another is a cost and management accounting. Rather, if research area is to take place, then I would not suggest to go for a cost, because no one is ready to give you the figures for the cost. So data availability for the cost will be very difficult. But yes, one can go for the extended area from cost to the management accounting. So one can have an management accounting also in the area of finance. Then auditing is there. There can be even taxation. In taxation, the GST is well versed for the research. It's a newly coming area, that is in the year 2017, the GST has been announced by the government. So before implementation of GST and after implementation of GST, yes, there is an area in which one can think about it. And there can be the government revenue, there can be any industry, there can be any service sector. Because of GST, what was before GST and what has happened after GST to the service sector. And we know that there are so many areas in the service sector and that has affected the GST. So effect of GST in several areas you can touch, and this can be a best research area nowadays because it's new. Just 4 years we have seen. And in that 4 years, what change has brought in, one can definitely talk on. Then in indirect taxes, you can have the customs duty also. The GST is a revenue to central government and the state government. Customs duty is the revenue to the central government only. So customs is also a very interesting area, because anything which is coming in to India and so many things are going out of India on which the tax is levied, which is called as a customs duty. So that area also one can take and reach further. Again, in custom duty, GST is also involved. If at all anyone is interested in the petrol and diesel, the petroleum product rather, I would say, the petroleum products prices are very high, increasing rapidly. So many times the government is also targeted in this particular area, that why the Pakistan, Sri Lanka, or the neighboring states petrol and diesel prices are very less, and why it is high in India. So can one go for the research on this particular aspect, that what has gone wrong? If the neighboring, we are calling that the beggars. In several times at the time of TV news channels, if we look at, they are saying Pakistan is just a beggar, and that beggars are also having the less prices for the petrol and diesel in their country. But then why in India the petrol prices are high? So for that particular petroleum product, tobacco product, still there is an area of excise duty, value added tax, service tax that also goes on for this particular products. So there also you can have an research. So as I have stated, that accounting, finance and taxation. Up till now I have stated about the finance and taxation. But yes, accounting is the best area. Those who are interested in accounting, so in accounting also, yes, one can go for. Because nowadays we have got, earlier there was accounting standard, AS we were calling. That accounting standards are prepared and asked to be implemented, right? Authority for that accounting standard is the Institute of Chartered Accountants. Steadily what has happened across the globe, it has come up with IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, that has come. So globally it was accepted by each and every country that yes, one should go for the IFRS. But in India, the Institute of Chartered Accountant has given a convergence of IFRS into Indian Accounting Standard, IND AS. So AS and IND AS, there is a huge scope of research in this particular aspect, which I can say, yes, from 2017 rather, it has been implemented in many industry service sector. And because of AS to IND AS, the profitability percentage has changed. Several times it has become a profitable unit becoming a loss-making unit. And some of the units which are loss-making units, they have come under the profit-making unit. So because of this accounting standard also, this has happened. So we can have the area for research, this particular aspect, and that is IND AS, and converting IFRS into IND AS. Mind it, that when we call off the multinational companies, their shares are traded in the capital market of foreign countries. For them, IFRS is compulsory. But when they are operating in India, it is only and only the IND AS to be incorporated. Then how this confusion to come out that somewhere Ind AS, same company, and somewhere it is IFRS, then this area becomes again the research area for the students, the youngsters. That's what one has to take place. So research areas, if I will go on speaking, it can be for hours together because there are so many things to go for the research. So I have stated about a small bit of accounting, finance, taxation, economics, rather a very small things I have stated to you about the avenues where one can go for the research. But yes, there are areas which I have not spelled out or coming to the time limit. I am just putting it. This list you can enlarge at n number of areas. Innumerable areas are there in the research area, and the youngsters, the young researchers definitely can reach to that area and obtain the satisfaction of the research. Ultimately, any young researcher should know that why he is doing research. What is the reason? Particularly, the research nowadays has become getting awarding or awarded PhD degree, Doctor of Philosophy, that degree one wants. And only for that PhD degree, if the research is to happen, then it has got a limited scope. Rather, I would say that research could be for academics, academia, or non-academia. The practical use of whatever you have invented, you have come out with some conclusions, and that can be used for commercial purposes, for society, or for any other areas which is useful. And for just your knowledge, I'm telling you, this new national education policy has already stated, and some of the university has adopted also, that whenever you are submitting your synopsis for the PhD, it is compulsory for a PhD student to clearly state that what is the use of your research is, where this is applicable, where it is benefiting. So that's what one has to mention in your synopsis. Then only that universities are accepting your synopsis and asking to proceed further for submission of the thesis. So this all research areas have changed. Lot many procedural aspects have brought changes, and it will going to give you the satisfaction of the research. I consider that awarded PhD, Doctor of Philosophy degree, is not that much important than what, when I do the research, you must be aware about this word eureka, eureka. Somebody or some fruits are falling from the tree on the earth, on the land. Is it for the first time? No. But that researcher has got an idea that why it falls on the land. That time he is saying eureka, eureka, eureka. So that gives them satisfaction. So ultimately, very, very important aspect for doing anything, any activity. If that gives you the satisfaction, that gives you the enjoyment, and achieving that enjoyment, achieving that happiness, I think much more important than that of getting the degree of the Doctor of Philosophy. So whenever I'm talking to young researchers, I always say that why you want to go for the PhD? Ultimately, objectives in your research are different. Objective for the research, writing thesis, reporting, writing may be different. But when you are entering into the research area, in that research area, why you are entering into? What has tempted you to enter into the research area? Subjects are many more, procedures are different, and in such thing, ultimately why you want to enter into? So that first you decide that whether I want is just getting the degree of research, whether I want academic purposes for that research, or it is other than academic purposes you want to go for the research, that is for the commercial use. Nowadays, you know that startups are going on. What is startup? Nothing but the research. So that is useful to the industry, that is useful to the society, that is useful to the common man, and ultimately research, anything bringing new. What exactly the research? What the research has been defined? The research is nothing but bringing something new, addition to the existing knowledge of that area. Whatever is existing, that existing, you are adding something, that becomes the research. Otherwise, there are so many cases when we are there sitting on the chair of a vice chancellor. We look at so many PhD theses that copy and paste. So this copy and paste research is not the research, and that will never give you the satisfaction. The utmost satisfaction is only and only if you are really finding something new to the subject, new to the knowledge, existing knowledge, that gives you the satisfaction. And so first, my young researcher, I would request you that you decide first that why you want to go for the research. Otherwise, copy paste. I'm not talking to that young researchers who are listening to me. For the research, young researchers, I would definitely suggest them that not to go for this area just before 10-15 days. In one Gujarati newspaper, the writer was Sinha, and he wrote about the Delhi University. That in Delhi University, more than 800 PhD scholars being awarded, and that Mr. Sinha, the writer, was asking that what's the use of this 900 students in one university are getting awarded the PhD degree? Are they useful? And somewhere it's a fact that somewhere the university is distributing the research degree, and somewhere the research degrees are sold. Selling the PhD or distributing the PhD is not under research. And I will request to the young researchers, please don't indulge in such type of activities which will failing to the entire attraction towards the research. Mind it, research area is very much attractive. I hope you are aware that for research, there is a JRF, that is Junior Research Fellow. The UGC gives you the scholarship, and that's not the small amount. And that amount extends to 35,000 to 40,000 per month for going for the research. And that is for 5 years continuously. And that JRF scholarship can be converted into SRF, the Senior Research Fellow. Then again that amount increases. So it can go beyond 40,000. Then why the UGC is spending so much money for the research? And then the very, I would not use the word the clever, the students are using that money and then they do not go for any research. and UGC has spent that money in vain, and that's how it is wasted the resource of the country into a vain. So that is not a real activity the young researchers should do. But yes, there are possibilities. If you are aware that government of Gujarat also gives the scholarship for more than 15,000, because 15,000 plus the expenses which you are incurring. The Gujarat government selects from each university that whom to give this type of scholarship. So that scholarship also you can get. But once again, I am coming back to that. It should be a research which satisfies you. Just write down the proposal. But mind it, writing proposal is not a joke. It's not an easy. The proposal is a very important document. Once again, here also, the new national education policy once again state about PhD proposal that it's not compulsory that you should write down the title of your research in the beginning for registration. No, this new national education policy says that up to the synopsis submission, you may change your particular title of the research, because whenever you are start thinking and while thinking, doing some activity, collecting data, analyzing the data, at that time you get some new ideas, and then the title also changes. So this policy, the new policy, is allowing us that, okay, you can change the topic. So that is how the proposal writing, why I'm saying it's not easy. Why I'm saying it's not easy, because it requires lot of reading. The subject matter in depth you have studied, and you have read so many articles and research papers on that particular area in which you are going to go for the research. So reading, studying, not only that, listening to the several lectures on a particular subject, not only that, but having the group discussion on this particular aspect, that you go on discussing with your friends, with your seniors, or even with your teachers. You go for discussion, and in that discussion, something will come out, and then you will be in a position to prepare your proposal. It is just proposal, but that proposal also requires so many things. And very important aspect of that proposal is the research gap. Mind it, in the beginning also I have stated that you are adding something new to the existing knowledge to that particular subject. So when you are adding, means it was not there. It was not there and you are adding to it. When it is possible? When you are read thoroughly the subject. You are gone for so many research papers, articles published, the books you are read, discuss with the friends or with the teachers. Then and then only you will be in a position to find out the research gap. So this is the area where I'm adding something new to the existing knowledge. That particular aspect is there in the proposal. So that research gap is very important, because that gives you the way to proceed further. This is something new I'm going to give to the society and to the academics. That's how the writing proposal is also very, very important. Then here also you have got the research design. You have got bibliography, references, so many things. First is introduction. Then what will be the sampling? Nowadays, a very popular sampling method which is written by the students and which I read, and that is a convenient sampling. If it is a convenient sampling, means you can pick up anything which is available to you. You are putting into that. So is convenient sampling is for your convenient PhD. For convenient PhD, the convenient sampling is there. There are so many things in sampling. People say random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, so on and so forth. So whenever you are going for research design, the sampling is also a very important part. And in that sampling, you will have either the primary data or the secondary data. Here also important aspect is you can have whatever is available information on your research area, which is already published, which is there somewhere, and that you are putting in your research. So that becomes the secondary area. But when you prepare, draft a questionnaire, means you are approaching your samples, and that sample you are submitting them the question you have framed, and for that you are asking the answer to your questions from that particular sample. That becomes the primary area, primary information, primary data. So collecting primary data is so preparing a questionnaire gives you lot of things, and that drafting questions is a technique, and in that technique is it possible that to whomsoever you are submitting that questions, is he in a position to answer your questions? Does he have that much knowledge that he will answer your questions properly? Because just submitting questions and getting answer is also very difficult. From whom you are selecting, and that's why the sampling is the very important area. So in proposal itself, you have to mention the method of sampling, whether you are collecting the primary data or whether you are collecting the secondary data. That's what is required to be mentioned in the proposal. In proposal, there can be even literature review. Mind it, literature review is not just picking up some thoughts, some writings, and putting in your literature review. That's not correct. The literature review is the gap which you have observed while studying, reading, discussing, that research gap related literature review you will have to submit, so that clearly you can say around your research gap, these are the areas where some other scholars have done some research, and that research also you have gone through, and that's how your particular literature review becomes relevant. Otherwise, if we look at the literature review, it is just filling up the pages in the thesis as well as the synopsis. See, I have seen in the 150 pages of the thesis, we always see that more than 40 pages are of literature review. Because nowadays, every PhD thesis requires not less than 150 pages. That's what normally we expect, that PhD thesis must have at least 150 pages. And then again, I don't know whether young researchers are aware about this plagiarism. In the year 2018, the UGC has given the clear-cut guidelines for plagiarism. Plagiarism is copy-paste. You have picked up something. See, in the literature review, you are picking up. You are pasting it in your thesis. That is not wrong. But in your thesis, if you are picking up something and you are not identifying it, that this is what I have picked up from Mr. X and I am writing it here, that you have to write down. You have to identify. You have to clearly say that, yes, this is what is I have read from this particular book. Otherwise, that comes under similarity. Somewhere you are picked up, from somewhere you are picked up, and you just stick to your thesis. So that is bad, and that similarity index should not be for more than 10% as per the UGC guideline of 2018. So this is how 2-3 points I have tried to explain you. Otherwise, this is the particular subject which can be talked on hours together. But as I have been given a limited time, and that is what is about just 25 minutes, sorry, 4:25, up to 4:25, I have to talk on this, and that particular aspect I have completed. So many things, some other time we will speak on this, but my area I have tried to cover to my satisfaction. Thank you very much for the organizers and the listeners. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. You have given very good insight in the entire
Alright,
research
sir.
process, right from research gap identification, review of literature, sampling, etc. And also we have given a wide area of, you can see, the topic ranging from banking sector to human resources, agriculture, economics, and rightly identified these GST before and after GST in the service sector and other sector, petroleum sector, etc. Sir has also identified and given some inputs or idea in terms of accounting standards, Indian accounting standards, and IFRS. So I think students should be able to identify and narrow down their choice given the wide. Heartily, on behalf of Veer Namat Saogat University, I express my deep sense of gratitude to sir. Thank you very much, sir. And
All
we
right,
look
thank you.
for the similar kind of interaction in future also.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Namaste.
All right, welcome.
જયદીપભાઈ હમણાં જોઈન્ટ થાય છે.
વેદાંત sir,
વેદાંત પંડ્યા સાહેબ જોઈન્ટ થાય છે. 2 મિનિટ આપણે રાહ જોઈએ.
હા હા. Okay. So by the time the Vedant sir joined, the sir has given the very good insight in how to prepare the research proposal, right? So those who are from management area, they have various specializations like marketing, finance, HR. Those who are from economics, they can have industrial economics, agriculture economics, labor economics, and so on. And the people who are from sociology or social science. So there are many areas. But the point is, how do we identify, how do we select a particular research topic or the topic area? I usually ask my student, I belong to management faculty, so I ask them to what is your area of interest? And what is your expertise, in which area you are comfortable, right? So try to identify and select those areas in which you are comfortable, which is of area of interest. That is one thing. Another thing is, if you are working somewhere, maybe if you are from industry or some other sector, or whichever sector you are working in, maybe if you are working or in whichever area you want to develop your career. So you try to identify those area and sector in which you are working or where you રાજેશભાઈ સંભળાય છે?
હા સાહેબ સંભળાય છે. સાહેબ આવી ગયા છે વેદાંત પંડ્યા સાહેબ. તમે એમનો ઇન્ટ્રો આપશો તો ચાલશે.
Okay. So shall we start?
Yes sir.
Okay. Okay. So very good afternoon to all, and a very good afternoon to Vedant sir. In the second session we have today with us Dr. Vedant Pandya, who is a professor of management at Maharaja Krishna Kumar Singhji Bhavnagar University, Bhavnagar. I heartily welcome Vedant sir on behalf of Veer Narmad Saugata University. I heartily welcome to this particular meet. That is Young Researchers Meet for Resurgence and Innovations. It is jointly organized by SSIP VNSU and Research for Resurgence Foundation. And the theme for today's session is the research avenues and new areas. So, sir has, as I told you, at present he is working as serving as a professor of management at Maharaja Krishna Kumar Singhji Bhavnagar University, Bhavnagar. He has also served as the joint CEO and director of Knowledge Consortium of Gujarat, Government of Gujarat. So Vedant sir has more than 25 years of research and teaching experience. So I express my deep sense of gratitude to Vedant sir for having accepted the invitations and uh, agreed to guide our students, research students. So without wasting much of time, I request Vedant sir to take over the charge. Vedant sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everybody. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, you audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I'll start with a request to share the screen if possible. Is it possible to share the screen?
It is possible, sir. You can share your screen, sir.
I think it says only the organizers, the host can share the screen. So can you change the settings and okay, all right. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. I don't know whether I'll be able to. Yes. Am I audible and whether the screen that I'm sharing is visible?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
All right. Thank you very much. At the outset, I again thank both the organizers for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to share my views. I thank the initial coordinators who helped me to settle down and share my screen and a very nice introduction. As I understand that this program is for those students who are ready for their PhD entrance. They have already cleared that PhD entrance and they are ready for the actual research work. I would deal with my talk in about two different parts. The first part is that I believe that without reviewing the literature, the settling down to and deciding a particular research area and the topic and then the title and the research question and all is absolutely not possible. So my first part, I would deal my first part to some discussion on literature review. And my second part, I would try to highlight some of those areas which are still not yet explored fully and which need to be explored. I would use these slides only for the base of what I would try to convey. So in about next 30 minutes or so, I would divide my thoughts in these two parts. We popularly understand that the term literature review or review of the literature or review of the related literature plays a very, very vital role, and very, very repeatedly it falls into the researcher's research work. So let's try to understand a few things about it. Here, the term literature means the research work, and the research work can be either in the form of a research paper, research project report, PhD or MPhil or master's thesis, and reviewing So, why do we carry out the literature review? The first is to demonstrate the knowledge about the subject. How do we demonstrate the knowledge about the subject? The literature review helps us to understand what is known in this field, what questions have been answered, how the answers have been arrived at, in terms of what methodologies have been used in getting the answer to the research questions. in that domain, what sort of questions have been asked so far? And what are those questions which have been asked but yet not been answered so far? So, what is known in this world on this subject and what has yet to be known? So, from known to unknown, the journey is possible only with the help of literature review. And it also gives us an outline of the relevant, related thoughts, relevant concepts, theories, models, and certain theses and certain line of action, certain uh, thoughts, school of thoughts. These basic things are available by none other than reviewing the literature. It helps us to find out the gaps, and that is a starting point for selecting our research question. If somebody has already answered a question, uh, repeating that and getting the same answer has a limited usefulness in the research work. So, not ideally, but the basic benchmark of the emerging India, the resurgent India, the awakening India, basic benchmark is asking the new questions to get the answers. So it's only the research gap that has to be picked up as the topic for research and the title for research and all that. And that is available by no other process other than what we know and what we call as literature review. Sometimes people also try to make an assessment of how much research has been done in that subject in past. So knowing the past and then going ahead, the journey is further, journey is forward, but it is possible only when we look at what has happened so far, because the researcher will always sit on the shoulders of those who have already done research. And everyone, the beginner particularly, always sits on the shoulders of the giants. And shoulders of the giants means existing body of knowledge. Whatever body of knowledge exists because of the research work done in past by the researchers is invaluable, because it helps us to know which direction we will have to go in forward going. In forward going, in forward moving, there are several. Also, technically speaking, the hypothesis is developed. The hypothesis is developed based on the research gap. A research gap is an unanswered question, and literature review helps us to know what questions have been answered, what questions have yet to be answered, and they are not answered and have yet to be answered. Sometimes the same question answered with one methodology, it gives you one type of truth, will give you one type of answer, and we change the methodology and we get the another type of truth, another type of answer. So methodology, the choice of methodologies in terms of selecting the samples, analyzing the data, play a very, very important role in the research work. So reviewing the literature for methodological relevance is also extremely critical for the researcher. Sometimes we carry out causal design, and we try to identify certain variables to add to the variables list is possible only when we know existing body of knowledge, and we know that which are those variables have been studied so far, and which are those variables which can probably be studied or can be dropped based on its relevance. And very interestingly, many researchers carry out certain research in different time horizon, different points of time. They test the same question, they ask the same question after 10 years or after 20 years or after 30 years. The points of time changes, and they just try to know whether the answers are the same or the answers are different. Sometimes the geographical location changes, same question is asked, same research problem is tested, and the answers are different or it is the same one. So researchers are extremely passionate about comparing their results with the existing results, and they would try to know whether their results, research findings, are consistent with the existing body of knowledge or they are inconsistent. Sometimes we feel strange about from where do we get the research work, the research literature. So one is the peer-reviewed journal and research article, research papers. Sometimes the conference papers also play an important role. But in the recent times, in last about 10 to 15 to 20 years time, internet has been a major source of the research literature. Sometimes the past theses, whether it is a doctoral thesis, master thesis, MPhil thesis, or even sometimes the bachelor's theses, they play a very vital role in understanding the existing body of knowledge through the literature review. And many a times, newspapers and magazines give a good lead towards the original research work. They do not necessarily publish the full research work in terms of research paper or research project reports and all that. But no doubt, they give us an interesting lead to the reference of the research work that about the Nobel laureate getting Nobel Prize for doing some research. And that is a good lead for us to go towards the research papers and all that. Many times the trade journals also give us good lead. How do we review? We review it in terms of assessing it, in terms of what is the source of that literature and who are the authors, and they are experts in which of those fields that they're working into. What work they have published in a similar area. Is the piece of literature referenced elsewhere or articles on the subject? And finally, using your own knowledge, how good do you think the article is? And that is the first-hand review, and that's the way one decides whether to pick up this research paper, research literature for their reviewing purpose or not. So the literature is not blindly reviewed. It is first assessed in terms of its relevance to the researcher. So all those participants of this particular program is a very direct relevance to them, that they pick up, they have searched for about 300 research literature, and all these 300 are relevant for them. I think this slide would help them to decide which of those research work is useful to them. Sometimes the websites are also useful. Academic institutions are there, publishers are there, some official companies, some organizations are also. Sometimes the personal web page, the faculty's web page of the university faculty or research institutions faculties, they in their personal web page, there are a lot of publications, free downloadable publications, full texts are available. So that is also a good sources for finding out the research work through websites. And sometimes the websites are also assessed in terms of when was it updated. So last updated on, that makes things very clear that how old the research work are available over here. And then finally, after reviewing the literature, the written part is most essential. I would not go into more detail about it, because the purpose of this part of the presentation was to highlight, to give a glimpse of the inevitable usefulness of the existing body of knowledge before deciding which area, which topic, and which title the researcher has to work on. So the purpose of this part of the presentation was that. Let me also continue for one or two more slides on this. Sometimes people say, how do we review the literature? The couple of things are here. Begin the review with a broad overview of the relevant ideas, the concepts, the definitions, and then you narrow down the relevant work. The past research should be grouped into different categories. For example, studies related to the relevant topic, similar methodologies, similar findings and results and conclusions. Sometimes researchers also group this in terms of geographical locations. The studies carried out into the corporate sectors in India, corporate sectors in, for example, in Japan or some European countries or US, some other countries. So country-wise, they group it out. Sometimes the methodology, sometimes the researcher's point of view, and many a times it is the research area or the subject wise that they go into. The literature review tells us what do we know and how do we get the answer to this? We get answers to this by asking those questions and referring to the existing body of knowledge. And that also helps us to know what we do not know about it. So what are those research gaps? Which questions are unanswered? And then you decide that if I'm planning to do my research in this particular area, whether that would fit into it. So before the researcher decides the topic, maybe the topic is okay, but then the title, exact research question can be framed only after the researcher knows the existing body of knowledge in terms in two aspects. One, how much research has been done on it, and which are those areas of that research topic which have still not been researched. So what do we know and what we do not know? Knowing these two things will help the researcher to decide the topic and the title, in fact. And probably what sort of assumptions can be tested. So what are those probable hypotheses? And this is sometimes the researchers' experience says that this had been their critical part of that research work. They made a small compromise and some mistakes over here, and then the entire research question and the research work falls into a different category. Some mistakes in the literature review is it's not making the review simply a list of past studies or producing an annotated bibliography. It is not only listing it out. It's not the historical or chronological or in past who has done the research. No, that's not the point. But sometimes people just make a mistake by just listing it out. Listing 100 research is not the literature review. Sometimes students do not relate the literature review on to the study, and they don't make it simple, a general review. In fact, they make a simple review of the subject matter, and they do not relate it to their subject matter. I'll come back to this point later, where I deal with the second part of my talk. Sometimes students do not take time to identify the best resources and give such sources due emphasis, while at the same time overemphasizing the weaker or less important sources. Whatever is available is not necessarily of a good quality. We need to identify some of those good research papers, good research journals, good authors, and their research papers and their research work. Some good institutions do publish their research work. So not whatever is available, but whatever is available, the best of them is generally picked up for reviewing. Any literature is not to be reviewed, but a relevant and a good quality literature is reviewed. Sometimes relying on secondary rather than primary sources of literature. So somebody has referred and reviewed a literature and carried out a literature review and published a paper of literature review. And referring that doesn't make sense. We have to pick up each research work independently and review it. Sometimes it is without critically accepting the findings of existing literature rather than critically evaluating them. And we need to know which methodology of analysis has been used, data analysis techniques. And if it is not appropriate, the review of literature should also identify that this is not appropriate. Sometimes the contradicting findings are there, and the review has to accommodate and mention that there are two contradicting findings. And sometimes raising problematic issues but not addressing them. Just identify, you observe in literature review, you observe that this is a problem, but you do not take that into consideration in your research work. And students would know, how do I know if I've completed my review of literature? The key literature coverage is important. Relevant literature has to be covered, has to be gathered and then reviewed. And whether the review is of those literature which are updated. Sometimes some researcher starts working in the month of April 2021, and the literature gathered is up to 2010, 2012, and then it is not updated. And therefore, a recent updated, most recent findings have to be accommodated. Sometimes any literature is gathered, but it is not anything related to that, but only related to your research question. The literature which addresses, which answers your research questions or some related to that only has to be covered. And the researcher must identify the contradictions as well as supporting viewpoints. If the researcher starts with certain hypothesis, and which are those findings, which are the aspects of the research work which contradicts that view, and which are those research work which supports the probable research hypothesis. Also, the researcher has to know, have I produced a critical assessment rather than a descriptive review? You simply describe who has done which research and you critically assess. There is a huge difference. Have I organized the review into a logical, coherent structure rather simply producing a list of literature? Many research students commit a mistake of simply listing out 40, 50 or 60 literature and then they review it. But that would be probably not appreciated. What is important is then clubbing all of them together and then logically identifying a few things. And also identifying the gaps and the weaknesses of the existing literature in terms of methodology, in terms of the sample, in terms of the research questions and all that. And the researcher finally has to prove whether the research question has emerged out of the research gap which is identified from the research literature. So that is an important one. And therefore, having said this, what comes in my mind worthy of sharing to the students right now is that while identifying, selecting, and making a probable list of probable research areas, a few things have to be considered in mind, have to be kept in mind, and probably without any compromise. The first is the relevance. Whatever research question that you're talking about, whatever field that you're talking about, that you're planning to work on, say, stock exchanges. So whether the stock exchange has become relevant today, is it gaining more and more significance? Whether it has any impact? So pick up only those questions, those topics, those research areas which are relevant to not only you and your degree, but also to the larger world as a whole. And it has to be significant, because getting answers to some aspects of those things, like understanding stock exchange behavior and predicting its behavior, say, for example, tomorrow, Monday, how the stock exchange would behave, how much it would go up or how much the Sensex or Nifty would go down, is very, very difficult to predict. It is as difficult as forecasting the earthquake. So certain questions are very, very relevant, and very less has been known about it. And therefore, working on any aspect of stock exchange, for example, or share price behavior, stock market behavior, is extremely critical. And without its establishing its relevance, significance, and its real impact on the mankind, or any some segment of the mankind, the research areas should not be picked up. It would be easy for many students to pick up certain areas which may not be relevant, which are not significant, but it is easy to do a doctoral work. But the student should be advisably should avoid this. Of late, in India, all over the world also, the commercialization of knowledge has gained its tremendous importance. Good institutions like Indian Institute of Technology, Indian Institute of Management, and many other premier educational institutions in India and also outside India, they have one common characteristics, and one of them is their research findings are of direct relevance to solving the real life problems of the society. The second characteristics of these good research institutions is that research projects, research areas, research questions have emerged out of the consulting world. the clients approach the research faculties and would say that this is our difficulty, this is our problem, and we would like to get a solution of this. And we can fund a couple of PhDs and some other research projects on it. And please help us to understand the solution of this problem. And therefore, not only commercial in terms of its income or revenue to the institutions or the researchers, but also whether a research work done in one village or few villages of one district, can you scale it up? Can you replicate it to another area, another districts? And replicability and scalability are also an interesting area that one should keep in mind. And of late, even in commerce, management, accounting, social sciences, the intellectual property is gaining its momentum. So maybe it may appear premature today on 4th of April 2021, but days are not far. Very soon, the research works done in the social sciences would also be covered under intellectual property. So share your findings, share your research ideas, share your research questions and methodologies and all using discretionary power. Don't indiscriminately share your ideas and all that, because who knows who would pick up this idea. And therefore, I said the real life problem has to be research work. And I would suggest all those young aspirant for doing research in commerce management and probably social sciences to connect their work, their research area, research topic, research title to the real life problem. A Netherlands-based researcher has published a book, Engaged Scholarship. The scholarly profile of the person. The teachers are highly scholar, but then they have get to connected to the society. They have get to engaged themselves. They have to connect themselves to the real life. So all these future researchers must also keep in mind to connect the real life with their research work. Many times the institutional sponsored research problems, corporate sponsored, and I'm very enthused to also include the government sponsored, government supported research works are there. So it would not only help the researchers and the research guide to connect to the real life situation, but also it would add and shape the biodata in a different way. And therefore, the research area should also emphasize on old answers to new problems. We have the traditional original knowledge. Our Indian knowledge system is claimed to have answers to all problems, not only of older times, but of not only today's time, but also for the time to come in future. So whether the Indian knowledge system can be linked to the real life problems of today's time, and can we find out the answers to the recent questions, the new questions which are unanswered, and can we get those answers from the old answers? The problems, the new problems, new questions can also be resolved through the old answers. And many times the new answers are required, new way to understand is required to resolve the new challenges, the new problems of the societies. For example, the research areas in commerce, management, accounting, finance, and all are largely into, say, banking, finance, and accounting. In management point of view, there is a functional management in terms of, these are only illustrative list, marketing management, human resource management. Some people talk about organizational development, OD, and they carry out research on organization as a whole. Some people talk about the government and the public policy as such. Sometimes what is important is also helping the private sector and similarly the public sector, the PSUs and public services, the common mass services have been increasingly becoming complicated, and the pressure of making it low cost and making it more efficient, more effective, outreach to as much crores and crores of people, there is a pressure on the public services. So whether it is a health service or transport services or communication services, so how these problems can be understood better, and having understood, how can we find a better answers to those questions? These are also some of those areas. Let me pick up the issue of, say, governance. Popularly gained its popularity since 1991, the Cadbury Committee, London Stock Exchange, and then the world started working on the domain known as corporate governance. But for example, the governance is also equally relevant for colleges, the universities, the educational sector, the public services, the hospital, the governance in hospital, governance in, say, the railways, one railway station, and then the governance of it can be understood. So whether we call governance or corporate governance, unfortunately, the answer to the body of knowledge is only restricted up to the structural aspect of it. So corporate governance structures are only something that has been within the reach of the mankind so far. People have studied only up to governance structure. But equally important, rather more important, is the processes, the decision-making processes, planning processes and all are more important than the structural arrangements. And they have not yet been answered completely. They have not, people have just started working on the governance processes. So while identifying the governance issue as a relevant issue, significant, has tremendous impact, but would also avoid doing research or duplicating the research on the structural aspect of governance, and should focus therefore on the process aspects of it. And I also gave an example before, the stock market behavior, for example. And if we validate the stock market behavior on these relevance, significance, and its impact, can we scale it up? Can we replicate it? I think this is another example. Another area in stock market, for example, these are only illustrative. These are randomly picked up to convey my point. All over the world, every country is happening in one country affects the happening in the another country. So stock markets do not now operate and they do not exist in isolation. They also get influenced by other country and they also impact the other country. So integrated, looking at the stock market, the capital market, and several other money market, capital market, and integrated economic looking at it, and getting the answer has become very relevant nowadays. Some people also identify from finance area, for example, the profitability or financial performance measurement. The financial performance has been well cultivated, but can we identify non-financial using not only the balanced scorecard, but something more than that. So how non-financial ways of measuring performance and what answers we get, I think that can also be looked at. One area which has not yet got momentum in India, to the extent it has got momentum all over the world, is just illustratively is the domain of social capital. Like financial and economic ways of understanding capital, there is social capital. It consists of norms and networks, for example. So if you are trying to understand how one particular city has performed better, or how the industries, steel industries in India have performed better or not performed better, or a particular organization, say one university has performed better and one university has failed to perform better. Whether it is an organization in terms of a hospital or research institution or a university, college, or for profit, or even an NGO, some NGOs perform excellent. What makes the performance better, or what makes them to flop and fail? One way to look at it, one of those many ways, there are many ways, but one of the important ways to look at it is through the eyes of social capital. And India is a country of diversity, and one of the organizers' motto is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and Vasudha Eva Kutumbakam. What does it mean? How do we understand India in a better way? India is full of diverse in terms of culture, language, and many other aspects, religion and all, traditions. But how do we understand this diversity better? Should we only stop at criticizing our old traditions? For example, Sati Pratha and all others, and that's all that we were consisting of. Today, the Indian traditions, the cultural traditions of varieties of nature, lakhs and lakhs of traditions, whether it is caste-based or geography-based or sub-caste-based or tradition, the occasion-based, the norms, the traditions are nothing but the norms. They determine the traditions. And the connectedness, India is one of these Eastern societies, and Eastern societies differ from Western societies in terms of its closely knitness. So we are a very closely knit society. And therefore, the connectedness is more impacting in India, in Western, I mean, as compared to the Western culture. So organizational social capital makes a huge difference, and we have yet to find the answer, and we have yet to do research on, in a simple sense, we have yet to do research on several research questions asked from social capital point of view. So how social capital plays an important role, what existing social capital that we have in the city of Surat and city of Vadodara and city of Rajkot. All the three cities have their unique social capital. And what are those good points of the social capital which were cohesive to development and which were like barriers to development? Surat was not as bright city as it is today, and it underwent its dramatic transformation. And what is the secret of it? If we look at the norms and networks, if we look at the social capital point of view, in my opinion, social capital played an immensely valuable role in transforming Surat. If Surat's people would not have come together, their norms and their connectedness, the networks, had that not worked positively, Surat would not have been the Surat as we see today. And last thing, which I'll stop my some of those thoughts. The last part of my thought is about happiness. People talk about happiness, institutional, the organizational happiness, happiness at work, for example, and usually has been existing on happiness at work and individual happiness. So what makes a person happy and to happiness? Interested in knowing what makes the employees happy and what makes them unhappy. So happiness is also gaining momentum. There are ministries of happiness. There are happiness indexes. And many countries are leading countries. And our neighboring country, one of our neighboring countries, also investing huge in happiness. So happiness is also forthcoming area. For example, these are only illustrative lists. And then how do we understand the happiness of employees in the emerging research in India? India is awakening India. So in the awakening India, we cannot leave certain areas of research left unanswered. It is high time that we need to pick up these areas for further research. We cannot afford to delay it anymore. I'm surprised I still not got the answer why many of those areas have not yet been picked up in the way it should have been picked up. India is an emerging, awakening India. So there are a lot of awakening. Many institutions, many researchers are doing wonderful job. But the scale and intensity with which it should happen has not been happening. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts and giving me an opportunity to communicate to the young listeners.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vedant sir. The review of literature will definitely give the students a very good insight and a starting point to decide and start their research journey. Vedant sir has also identified other areas which are less explored in India, like in terms of corporate governance, etc., or social capital or the happiness. In addition to those traditional areas like marketing, finance, HR, production operations management, and advertising, and so on. So I think, but as you rightly pointed out, for any research, the starting point is the review of literature that would give them the direction, the ideas, and even help them to identify their research gap to start their research journey. So I once again express my gratitude on behalf of Veer Narmad South Gujarat University for sparing your valuable time and giving such insightful talk on the research review of literature and the research areas and venues. And we look for similar kind of interaction in future also. So thank you, Vedant sir. Thank you once again. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Jaideep sir, shall we terminate the session? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So tomorrow also we'll have
tomorrow
on this same platform. We'll have the scheduled lectures, right? So right now we are just summing up the entire session. Thank you very much, sir.
Sure, sure.
Thank you, Vedant, sir.
Okay. Thank you all.
very
Bye.
much.